And we're going to tackle this question of, is Jesus arrogant? I don't know if you've ever come across someone who you've thought is truly arrogant. I once sent a very arrogant text. Now I have to be honest with this. It genuinely was a mistake. Okay, it was a mistake. But we'd been doing this thing. We'd been working really hard. It was this kind of Christmas event we were doing, and the team of us had been working really hard. And this lady called Christine had done nearly all the work. So I wanted to text her at the end and just to say thank you to her. And this is what I texted her. Hi Christine, just to say I have done an amazing job over the last few days. So she gets this text from me. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this problem, but I and you are next to each other on the keyboard. So obviously I meant to put, you've done an amazing job, but she just got a text saying I've done an amazing job. And in some ways that's kind of the height of arrogance. It's I. I is the arrogant word. It's an arrogant thing to say. You probably heard of Muhammad Ali. Listen to what Muhammad Ali said. This is a poem. Muhammad Ali used to like to write poems. This is a poem he wrote. His most famous fight was the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman. And this is what he wrote. This is what he said. Last night I had a dream when I got to Africa. I can't do it like he did. I should have got a recording of this because I'm going to spoil it by him. I had one of a hell of a rumble. I had to beat Tarzan's behind first for claiming to be king of the jungle. For this fight, I've wrestled with alligators, I've tussled with a whale, I've done handcuffed lightning and thrown thunder in jail. You know I'm bad. Just last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick. I'm so fast, man, I can run through a hurricane and don't get wet. When George Foreman meets me, he'll pay his debt. I can drown the drink of water and kill a dead tree. Wait till you see Muhammad Ali. There's a guy who has trouble with self-esteem. And in fact, the story's told of Muhammad Ali. He was once on an aeroplane. I don't know if you heard this story. He was on an aeroplane, and the sign went on to say you had to put your seatbelt on. And the air hostess came over and said, "So you need to put your seatbelt on." And he said, "Madam, Superman don't need no seatbelt." And she replied, "Superman don't need no plane. Now put on your seatbelt." So there are people who are arrogant. Now what I want us to try and do is, if you've never thought of Jesus as arrogant, and perhaps you think, why are we talking about Jesus being arrogant? I thought he was a nice bloke. You know, he did nice things. Jesus, hands are kind hands, doing good to all, that kind of stuff. You know, my first job is to try and show you that actually what Jesus says really does sound incredibly arrogant. And if you've never thought that Jesus is arrogant, it's probably because you've never really understood what he says. So let me start by showing you, some of the things that Jesus says. Back on Monday, I think it was, I told you that in this book of John, this part of the Bible, it's just a biography of Jesus' life. In this part of the Bible, John gives us 7 signs, 7 miracles that Jesus does to kind of give us evidence for who he is. Now, alongside those, there are also 7 claims that Jesus makes. I want to show you them, because it's difficult to read them and not say, boy, that sounds arrogant. Let me show you what I mean. So turn in your little books, grab those, and we're going to go to chapter 6 first. It's on page 18. If you go to page 18 in these books, here's claim number 1. Okay, 7 claims. We're going to go through these really quick, right? And near the bottom of page 18, sentence number 35, listen to what Jesus said. Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." I am the bread of life. That's a pretty big claim. Okay, that's claim number 1. Let's flick over to chapter 8. We're going to go to page 24. You've got to try and hold these in your head, okay? I'm the bread of life. Here's the second one. You ready? Near the bottom of page 24, sentence number 12 says, again, Jesus spoke to them saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." That's claim number 2. I am the light of the world. Can't you begin to feel, boy, it's a big thing Jesus is saying. This isn't the nice little Jesus who does kind little things and is mild and meek and obedient. This is Jesus making massive claims. Okay, let's flick over to the third one. Go to John 10, page 30. There are two on this page. So we've had the bread, we've had He's the light. Right, have a look at verse 7. Sentence number 7 at the bottom of page 30. So Jesus again said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep." So he claims to be the door. That is, he claims to be the one through whom you can find true life. The one through whom, as you enter, as you go through him, you find true life. I am the door. Or just over on page 31, sentence number 14, right in the middle of the page there. Here he comes again. I am the good shepherd. Do you see how these are building up? I don't know how many we've had now. Is that 4 we've had now? Yep, the bread, I'm the life, I'm the door, I'm the good shepherd. Let's go over to John chapter 11, a couple of pages later. And let's turn to page 34. Just trying to show you how John, this gospel fits together, how it works, okay? Sentence number 25. Jesus said to her, this is near the top of page 34, Jesus said to her, he's talking to a lady called Martha, her brother's just died. This is pretty insensitive, really, to someone whose brother has just died. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Massive claim. The resurrection and the life, the one who has power over life itself. These are the sort of things Jesus said. If you go over to, that was number 5, got 2 more. If you go to chapter 14, page 43. Page 43. Sentence number 6 on page 43. Here's the 6th one. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm the way. I'm the one who speaks truth. I am the one through whom you can come to the Father. In fact, no one comes to the Father except through me. These are the sort of reasons that people say he's arrogant, because of these claims. There's one more in John 15. Turn over just one page to page 45. And sentence number 5, where Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. So here is Jesus. 7 times in John's Gospel he says, I am the something. I'm the bread, I'm the light, I'm the resurrection and the life, I'm the way, the truth and the life, I'm the door, I'm the good shepherd, I'm the true vine. Now it's worth us just seeing that those are massive claims, aren't they? Those are not little things. Jesus didn't come and say, I've got some good ideas, I'm a nice teacher. He came and said, he pointed to himself and said, I am the light, I am the bread. And it's saying something about our world. You see, if Jesus is the bread of life, that means as he looks at the world, he says, this is a hungry world. I don't mean physically hungry, I mean spiritually hungry. A world where people can't find meaning, where people are starving. When Jesus says, I'm the light, he's looking at the world and saying, it's a world of darkness. All around us, there's darkness. People who experience things that just feel so dark, it feels so confusing, it feels so hard. When Jesus says, I'm the door, he's saying, all around me I can see people who are shut out, who are shut away from God, shut away from true meaning, who feel like that on the outside. When Jesus says he's the good shepherd, he says, all around me I can see people in danger. When Jesus says he's the resurrection and the life, he says, all around me I can see people dying. I can see people tainted with death. When Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth and the life, he says, all around me I can see people who are lost, who don't know the way, they don't know where they're going. And when Jesus says, I'm the true vine, he says, all around me I can see people who are cut off, people who have no roots, people who are drifting. And Jesus comes and he stands on the stage of this world and he says, I'm the one who can fix that. I'm the one who can feed that hungry soul, who can bring light in the darkness, who is the door for those who are shut out, who's the good shepherd for those in danger, who is the resurrection and the life for those who are dying, who is the way for those who are lost, and who is the true vine for those who've been cut off. Do you see what big claim it is? No wonder people call him arrogant. In fact, if we really understood kind of the Old Testament, the bit that came before Jesus, it would be even more arrogant. There's something in these sayings that's even more shocking. And that is that when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, I am, do you know what he's doing? He is taking a name which for the Jews, they would have known that was the name of God. You see, way back, if I walk over here, I'm going to walk off the camera, but never mind. Bye, camera. Way back, when God first introduced himself, when a man called Moses met God back in Exodus, Moses said to God, God, what is your name? And God said, I am who I am. It's the Hebrew word Yahweh. I am who I am. And so this name, I am, became a name that spoke of the very being of God, the very existence of God. God says, I am the one who exists in myself. I have perfect being. I am who I am. And suddenly some bloke turns up in from Galilee, a carpenter out of nowhere, and he starts saying, I am. Do you see what a massive claim this is that Jesus is making? This is a claim to be God. I am. And as he looks at the dark, hungry, broken world, he says, I am. God has come to fix this world. No wonder people say he's arrogant. And not only is it a massive claim, it is also an exclusive claim. Now, this is what gets Jesus in a lot of trouble. This is why people don't like him. They didn't like him when he lived. That's why they crucified him. And they still don't like him today. Because Jesus makes an exclusive claim. And I want to show you I just want to make it clear what Jesus is saying. He doesn't say, I am a light in the darkness. He uses a terribly offensive word. The word the. That is very offensive, isn't it? Because Jesus says, I am the light of the world. That doesn't leave much room for any other lights, does it? That doesn't leave much room for someone else to come and say, oh, could I have a go at being the light for one bit of the world? No. I am the light of the world. End of. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. I am the way. Do you see what Jesus is saying? It is only me. It is only me who can bring life to a dying world. It's only me who can bring light to a dark world. It's only me. And that one that we saw when he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, he makes it explicitly clear. He says, no one comes to the Father except through me. Do you get why people call him arrogant? Do you get why people are so offended by him? Okay, well, we've done a great job of answering the question. At this point, it sounds like we're saying, yes, he's very arrogant. Now I want to show you why he is anything but arrogant. Now I want to show you what makes him so staggeringly different. And there's two things I want to show you. Firstly, he's not arrogant because he's right, because he's speaking truth. You see, if it's true that Jesus really is God, and if it's true that Jesus really has come into this world of darkness to bring light, suddenly that makes him less arrogant than simply someone speaking what's true. Fine. If he's just another bloke, this is the height of arrogance. And genuinely, if he is just a man, he is the most arrogant man who's ever lived. But if he's God, this isn't arrogance. This is him speaking truth. You see, the reality is that Jesus is right about our world, isn't he? I mean, come on, as you look around our world, haven't you experienced that? Haven't you experienced, can't you see how hungry people are for meaning? People desperate to find something that will give them meaning, feeding themselves with all sorts of rubbish which isn't helping, it's just making them more hungry. Haven't you experienced that? You only have to walk up the city just a few hundred yards to see people streaming into London, working their guts out, destroying their families because they're hungry for money and they think money's going to satisfy them, and it doesn't, because money's not the bread of life. Jesus is. Haven't you seen that there's darkness? You know, why is our world like this? Why is it that our world is hungry and dark? I tell you why. It's not because Jesus is arrogant. It's because we as human beings have been extraordinarily arrogant. You see, the God who made us, the good God who made this world, we have said, we don't want you, we want to live for ourselves. That is arrogance. And because we've turned away, we've walked away from God, God who is the bread of life, God who is the light, because we've walked away from him, we've ended up in a world of darkness. We've ended up in a world of death and hunger and confusion and being shut out and all those things. But because God loves this world, he sent his Son, he sent Jesus. Jesus is God himself, God the Son, coming into our world to bring life and light and satisfy the hunger. So in one sense it's not arrogant because it's true, although there's a second reason it's not arrogant, and this is the best reason of all. Because you can still be arrogant and say true things, can't you? I want to show you one story which will prove to you that Jesus is not arrogant. I want you to go in these books to one last place. And I want you to go to page 40. Page 40. And this is right towards the end of Jesus' life. He's done all the miracles and the teaching, incredible things. This is the night before he's going to die on a cross. Look what he does. We're going to pick up at sentence number 3, okay? And I really want you to try and focus on this. Like all that we've said, all those arrogant sounding claims, look at this. Sentence number 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, Jesus, knowing those things, okay, what would you expect the next sentence to be? Jesus, knowing that he had all power, everything had been given to him by God, what would you do with all power? Imagine you were given that. You seen the film Bruce Almighty? If you haven't, Bruce, this man called Bruce, gets given God's power and he uses it for himself. He tries to get a girl, he uses his power for himself. Look what Jesus does with all power. You tell me if this is the actions of an arrogant man, okay? So knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he'd come from God and was going back to God, Jesus rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel, he tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered, what I'm doing you do not understand now, but afterwards you will understand. You see, here is Jesus. What does he do with all power? He gets down on his hands and knees and he washes the filth off his disciples' feet. Is that the actions of an arrogant man? He has all power. Most human beings would take all power and they'd use it for themselves. You find me one miracle that Jesus did for himself. You find me one time Jesus used his power for himself. Never. He had no home. He had no riches. He had no worldly power. He had no status. He got down on his knees and he washed his disciples' feet. Do you see? This is not an arrogant man. And in fact, more stunningly even than this, the very next day Jesus would walk his way to a cross to die. And on the cross when Jesus died, he was dying for me. you know what? I deserve to be hungry. I deserve to be in darkness. I deserve to be cut off and shut out. I deserve to be lost, and I deserve to die. Because I'm arrogant. I've treated God arrogantly. But do you know what Jesus did? Jesus went to a cross, and when he died on a cross, he experienced that punishment. He experienced that hunger. At the cross, Jesus was shut out. At the cross, Jesus was in danger. At the cross, Jesus was hungry. At the cross, Jesus was far away as he experienced the punishment that I deserve. So yeah, Jesus makes massive claims, but he backs them up with love. And Jesus gives himself. That's what it cost. Jesus is the light of the world, and Jesus says, I will give you light. I died to give you light. Now, have sometimes Christians been arrogant in the way we've spoken about Jesus? Oh yeah, we have. And it's wrong. Because when we speak of Jesus, we say, yes, he is the light of the world. He is the only way to God, and therefore I will serve you and I will love you like he did. There is no place for arrogance. Yes, it's an exclusive claim. But it's because because it's true, and because of his love. Now I'm going to leave it there because you will probably have questions. I mean, there will be some. How can we know if Jesus really is God? So, I mean, that's a fairly fundamental question. So, if everything I've been saying is on the basis that Jesus is God, and that really is the issue, isn't it? If Jesus is God, then he's really not being arrogant. He is speaking what is true, and actually that is good news. Because to be perfectly honest, if God really has come into our world and he's brought light and bread and a door and a shepherd to keep us safe and all those things, if he's really done that, that's good news. So it really comes down to this question of, is Jesus God? And I would simply encourage you to take one of these away with you and to read it. In many ways, I can stand here and try and convince you that Jesus is God, but this part of the Bible, John, was written, we thought about this on Monday, this part of the Bible was written to try and give us the evidence that Jesus really is God. That this is not just some kind of fairy tale thing, but actually this is evidence that's there for us to read. And so I encourage you to take it away, read it, and see what you make of it. Oh, more. Exactly. So this question says, couldn't anyone say they're the Son of God? Why should we believe in Jesus? Yes, absolutely. Anyone can say they're the Son of God. And lots of people have. But not many people But 1 billion people today around the world believe Jesus, that he really is the Son of God, and no one else really seems to have been able to pull it off in quite the same way Jesus did. So there clearly is something. I mean, okay, fine, you could get everybody who's ever claimed to be the Son of God and you could compare them all and see what you think. Or you could save yourself a lot of time by starting with the one who's probably the best contender, Jesus. I mean, if he's the closest anyone has ever got to pulling off this Son of God stunt, yeah? So you might as well start with him and say, well, is he the Son of God? Because if he is the Son of God, well, job done, let's follow him, trust him, he's the light of the world. Terrific, if you genuinely look at the evidence and you come to the conclusion that he's not the Son of God, well, that's your decision. The evidence is here for you to look at. The problem is that too many people start with the assumption he's not the Son of God, or they start with it, they refuse to believe it. I just want to encourage you to look at the evidence. If you're serious about the question, then find someone who you could sit down with and say, well, look, would you read this with me? Would you help me to understand it a bit more and answer my questions? And I know there's people in the scene who'd love to do that and to find out, to sit down with you and talk about that. So, yes, anyone could say they're the Son of God. It all hinges on that. And if you really want to push me, it actually all hinges on whether he rose from the dead or not, for me. it all comes down to, did he rise from the dead? Because if he rose from the dead, that's impressive. And if he rose from the dead, I'm pretty willing to listen to him on everything else. So I'd start there. I'd start with, did he rise from the dead? And you can, that is a historical claim. That's a fact from history that you can look at, you can find out about. Read the first-hand accounts. If you want to then be pointed in direction of some good books to read some books about it. You'll find books that say he didn't rise from the dead and others that say he did rise from the dead. Read them. Check it out. I'm not nervous about kind of the facts. I think the more you look at it, the more you study it, the more you go into it, you say, there's a lot of evidence here. We can talk about that some more sometime. And this is a good question. How can you be a scientist and believe in God? Do these not contradict? It is possible to be a scientist and believe in God because I'm one. I'm afraid I didn't study in London. I studied chemistry for 4 years at Oxford, and that's my training. That's my background. I was taught chemistry by a bloke who totally hated the fact I was a Christian. Massive atheist. In fact, the guy who taught me chemistry was a man called Professor Peter Atkins, and he used to say to me, the reason you believe in God is because your brain is starved of oxygen. Massive atheist, just thought I was a complete idiot. But here's what annoys me, okay? What annoys me is that scientists make out that it's a scientific thing to say there's no God. That's not scientific. Right? Science is about looking at what you can observe, experimenting, and then coming up with theories to fit what you can see. Now, God, by definition, if he exists, is outside of this physical material universe. So by definition, you can't use science to explore God. You can use science to explore what he's made, but you can't use science to explore God. So science, if you like, sits in the middle as a neutral thing. And you look at science and you say, you look at the world, you do your experiments, you discover the world, and you say, does it fit that there is a God or there isn't a God? They're both faith positions, yeah? Both of them, they're both things that you can't prove. You can't prove that there's no God, and you can't prove there is a God. You've got the evidence, you look at it, you make your decision. Now for me, I think there's massive clues that point towards there being a God. I don't think any of these, I don't think any of these prove it completely, but I think they're good evidence. So I look at the world and it looks to me like it's been designed by someone. Yeah? That's not a foolish thing to think. You say, well, what if it looks like it's designed because it is designed? Dawkins had to write a huge, great big book to explain why it looked like it was designed. The Blind Watchmaker. It's a brilliant book, very, very cleverly argued. But he's arguing it from a position that says, I'm going to say there's no God, and now I'm going to try and explain it. All I'm saying is, it could be that it looks like it's designed because it was. That's not a foolish argument, right? What about sense of morality? I care about right and wrong. Now, the atheists have got their reasons and their explanations for why we care, and it's all good for society and that kind of thing. Fine, that's one explanation. What about if right and wrong exist because there's a God who made us and we're in his image and he cares about right and wrong? That doesn't prove it, but it's another piece of evidence, yeah? And you build up the bits of evidence, you build up the clues. If I go out into the street and say, what's wrong with the world? I don't think anyone would say to me there's nothing wrong with the world. But of course, if you're an atheist, there can't be anything wrong with the world. It's just an accident. It's ridiculous to say what's wrong. It's just the way it is. And yet we have a profound sense that this world is not the way it was supposed to be. Why? Well, because there's something deep in us that says it was supposed to be something else. It has a purpose. I had to take a funeral for a baby. A 3-week-old baby, they brought the tiny little coffin in. Can you imagine if I'd stood there and said, actually, Grace had a genetic disorder, and it's good. We should celebrate that she's died, otherwise it would have weakened the human race. It would have weakened the gene pool if she'd lived. You see, it's all very well the kind of this atheistic worldview, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because in that moment, there is a profound sense that everything in you is crying, this is wrong. It's not supposed to be like this. And that's what the Bible says. Absolutely it's wrong. The world is a world of darkness and death and brokenness because we've turned away from God. And it fits with what I see in the world. So what I'm saying is, I did science. I saw no contradiction between science and God at all. In fact, I just discovered it was more amazing than I ever thought, what God had made. We need to finish in a second. Sorry, that was one of my favourite subjects. Someone got me started on a bad one. Let me just see if there's any others that we should tackle. Can Jesus be both fairly arrogant? Is it fairly arrogant and humble? Is it really arrogance that he displays? I'm not saying that Jesus was arrogant. I'm saying that Jesus, at first sight, it sounds like he's arrogant. But as you look at him, actually you discover there's not an arrogance, but a great humility. In the same way that if I saw a child who was being crushed by a big rock, and I was extremely strong, there's a lot of ifs in this, and I rushed up and said, I can lift the rock. In one situation, that would be very arrogant. But in another, that would be a very humble thing. I can lift the rock. Do you see the difference? That's Jesus. What about individuals that live humble and compassionate lives and serve like Jesus but don't recognise him as Lord? As Jesus is the only way, kind of thing. There are people who do very many good things. We need to finish, okay, because it's 1 o'clock. There are people who do very, very many good things. There are people who live wonderful lives, good lives. But here's the claim of the Bible, and this is offensive, and you may want to talk to me afterwards, but the claim of the Bible is, if you are ignoring Jesus, that is the most arrogant thing you can do. It doesn't matter how kind and compassionate and lovely you are. If God himself has come and you've said no, doesn't matter how kind and compassionate you are, you're ignoring the King. You're ignoring the God who made you. That is arrogant.